Deep within a bleak and dismal swamp, hidden beneath its murky waters, lies the headquarters of the most sinister villains of all time, the Legion of Doom.
Hey everyone, today we have a very exciting interview. I am joined by acclaimed writer and novelist Alex Segura, known for your work on The Black Ghost, Secret Identity, Dick Tracy, Archie Meets the Ramones, and some novels as well. But we're here to talk about your Dynamite Comics crossover series, Green Hornet and Miss Fury. But I'm very excited to chat with you, man. So this should be
Yeah,
a
I'm
lot of
glad to
fun.
be here. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so I was hoping you could start by sharing off a little bit of your story about how you got into writing and what was the difference like breaking into novels versus breaking into comics? What's the difference like?
Um, I was always I was always an avid reader as a kid, and always, once you start reading, you as a kid, I started making up my own stories. Like, what if this happened in the Archie comic, or what if Spider-Man fought this villain? Or I was really into the superhero trading cards as a kid. I don't know if you remember those, the '90s Marvel cards and the Disney
Mhm.
Cosmic Teams. Um, so those were fun for just like kind of learning about the universe and how everything works together. But my journey into novel writing and comic book writing happened kind of around the same time. I was working in comics at DC in the publicity department, and so that's when I started getting into writing and got into reading mystery novels more as a hobby. When comics the hobby became my job, my day job, it became, I started kind of reading other stuff for fun, to pass the time as opposed to do the work. And so once I started reading those, and there's certain novels that really spoke to me, I started trying to write my own. But that was such a long process, that I was really chipping away at it for years. And then at the same time, I did a short story for DC in their Halloween special. I think it was 2009's Halloween special. And then when I moved to Archie, they were open to me pitching ideas. And so I did a few kind of classic Archie stories, like, Archie goes on 4 dates in one night, and Archie Occupy Riverdale was one of the stories. And then after that, I think they felt confident enough to say, okay, he knows the characters. Let's give him something bigger, and that's where Archie Meets Kiss started. So and then at the same time, my first novel was getting ready to come out, and so it came out from a really tiny publisher in 2013.
That's awesome, man. Was Kiss like did you get to pick the band or were they telling you like, "Oh, this is like the people we wanted to cross over with?" Like do you was there is there a band you think Archie would be perfect to cross over with or was that Kiss?
Kiss was, I think Gene Simmons had approached the Archie CEO John Goldwater and said, "Let's do something together," and so that's where that came to be. And so it was not like a, choose from this list. It was more,
Okay.
this is what we're doing, and I said, well, yeah, I would love to do that. I think it would be cool. And they're such larger than life people, and
Yeah.
literally they're characters themselves. So I don't want to say it made it easier. It definitely made it more fantastical and bizarre in a good way, hopefully.
Is the creative process of like outlining your story or planning your story similar between comics and prose or is it like pretty different in a unique way?
It's different. I mean, there's some similarities. I am an outliner, so with a novel, I tend to have a pretty detailed roadmap of where I'm going and what's next and what I want to do. But with novels, I try to leave some wiggle room, and with comics too, you try to leave some wiggle room in case inspiration hits you. Like I'm working on a script today, um, and I had a pretty detailed plot synopsis, and then I extrapolated that into a page breakdown. But then as I was reading it, I was like, I want to just jump to the action, and I can always kind of recap this stuff as we go. But it's sometimes more fun to just get to the heart of the story. So you have to leave yourself enough wiggle room for those creative decisions, I think. And that's similar for both. And I'm a big outliner in both, but comics is a collaborative medium. So you're
Yeah.
immediately playing with other people. You're writing something that someone's gonna put pen to paper and draw, and they're adding their voice to what you started, and it won't look exactly the way you envisioned it in your head, but hopefully most of the time it looks better and it feels better because everyone's adding their best, and the end result is this cool jam session. Whereas with novels, it's really, you're the screenwriter, you're the director, you're the producer, you're the cinematographer, you're the costume designer. Everything falls on you, and then eventually your agent or your editor is going to read it. But by then, it's pretty close to what you'd envision. So it's much more solitary, which sometimes you want. Sometimes I
Yeah.
don't want to collaborate with anyone, and I just want to do it all. And other times, I get a kick out of playing with others.
So one thing that I noticed when I was reading Dick Tracy by you is it seemed timeless, but also like almost like an homage to the past. Do you think do you like working in that space where it's like is it the 40s, but it still feels like a modern comic? Like, do you like exploring the past with your mysteries, or do you think is it more fun to play in the past for you?
I think it depends on the story. I think with Dick Tracy, I think the impulse might be, well, let's make him modern, let's bring him into the present day, let's try something new. And Michael, my co-writer, and I really wanted to strive for an iconic Dick Tracy story that still, like you said, felt modern and relevant. I think our guiding light was sometimes Batman the Animated Series. This
Hmm.
idea that something that feels like it's happening in the past or has these trappings from different periods, but also feels remarkably present and modern. Obviously, it is set in the past. Batman the
Yeah.
Animated Series is kind of this dark deco that could be today, but could be the 40s. But um, I think playing in the past allows you to bring kind of modern sensibilities into these different times and see things from a different lens. But for that's just kind of like macro thinking in the terms of the story. We wanted to tell an iconic Dick Tracy story, but we wanted to do it the way we'd always envisioned it, like in a really dark, hard-boiled way that honors the Chester Gould strips, but doesn't feel like we're in a cover band, which is not a diss on anyone. Like we just didn't want, that's been done and done very well by many people. So we wanted to bring our voices into it and try to carve out a little new path for him.
I feel like you've worked on some like mini iconic characters,
Yeah.
and still put like your own spin on them. So I got to ask, heaven forbid, say you get kidnapped. Do you want the Question? Do you want Green Hornet, or do you want Dick Tracy on the case? Who do you want solving your mystery?
Oh man, that's hard. It's so funny because I was joking with someone that I'm working on all these characters with different color fedoras, like the like
Yeah.
the whole rainbow of trench coats and fedoras. I'm gonna say Renee because I think she would cut every corner to make sure she found me, and I
Yeah.
think I think Dick and Britt would get there eventually. I think they would all succeed. I just think Renee would probably get there a little faster.
Was was Renee like your first choice on which Question character you wanted to write? Like, were you always like a Renee fan over Vic,
Uh,
um, or
I
were
love
you
Vic
open to Renee?
Sage. I mean, the Denny O'Neil, Dennis Cowan, Bill Sienkiewicz question run is one of my favorite comics ever. But I have a real soft spot for Renee. I think in the same way that seeing Miguel O'Hara in a comic book, seeing Renee Montoya on Batman the Animated Series, and then Gotham Central was really a great moment of identification for me. Like I'm a Cuban American from Miami, so I know Renee's not Cuban, but seeing another Latinx character was really important to me, and I think it is important to have her out there doing her thing. And um, I love Vic. I think he's great, but Renee is probably my favorite.
I read comics kind of backwards. My first collected edition was Final Crisis, and my second one was 52. So
Wow.
I've always which because my friend was like, you read them backwards. So I went Final Crisis 52 and then Infinite Crisis, which was like the backwards way to read those events.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
I've
Final
always
Crisis kind of stands on its own. Like it doesn't really like.
yeah
It's funny when you think about like all these events that are quote unquote leading into Final Crisis. Grant was doing their own thing.
yeah. I always told people I didn't know enough to not know what I didn't know, so I just enjoyed it as a comic. Like when you see that iconic cover, how was I not going to pick it? But I've always
There's no
loved
wrong way
Renee.
to read.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no wrong way to. My first X-Men comic, I was talking about this in Baltimore, was the second part of the original Genosha storyline in the
Mhm.
'80s. So it's basically it's Wolverine and Rogue on the cover on a train in civilian clothes, except Wolverine has no powers. Rogue has no powers, and she's been possessed, basically taken over by Carol Danvers. And so if you don't go in there understanding all that canon and backstory, you're completely lost. But I think if the ride is fun,
Yeah.
you're going to want to find that information. Like readers are smart. I think
Yeah.
oftentimes writers think, well, I have to really dumb this down or make this quote unquote accessible to new readers. Like if someone likes what you're doing, they'll do the homework and figure out what's going on.
You're right. Every comic is someone's first. I feel like that's a trap people can get into at a certain point where they feel like everything needs to be read in the specific order, encyclopedia style. But like, it's okay to not know something and to Google something and to figure something out later. But
It's
I
so much
thought that,
easier to find stuff out now. Like before, I
yeah,
would have to go back to the comic shop or pick up an issue of Wizard, or maybe later like look it up on Newsarama. Now everything, there's wikis for everything. Like people who want to learn more about these characters will find a way. And so your job is to tell as compelling a story that is welcoming, but also doesn't write down to the reader. Because I think readers figure that out pretty quickly. Like, oh, this is just like it's not challenging me in any way.
Yeah. So, were you always a Green Hornet and Miss Fury fan? Did Dynamite like help you find like which characters you wanted to work on? And have they crossed over before? Because I know they're both 40s characters that are super iconic, but I don't have a
I
lot
don't
of
believe they've
history
crossed
on
over
them.
before. I don't believe they have. Miss Fury, I've been familiar with, just with a familiarity of like pulp heroes and public domain heroes, and I like some of the stuff Dynamite has done with her in the past. Green Hornet, I've had a longer history with. I remember seeing him when I was watching the '60s Batman show, and then the '60s
Hmm.
Hornet TV series, and just being fascinated by this very Batman-like superhero. Um, and then as I got older, reading some of the comics, I like what Mark Waid did with the character. Matt Wagner did a lot of great stuff with the character. And so um when Henry, my co-writer, and I were talking about what to do here, it felt like, the origin's been done. We want to explore Green Hornet's past, but also see how his past links up to Miss Fury's past, and weave them together, and kind of add some lore to both of them. But when Dynamite reached out, it was not, here's a list of characters to choose from. It was like, would you want to do this? And I don't think I hesitated to say yes, because Green Hornet's definitely been on my bucket list. And Miss Fury has actually been a lot of fun to write and kind of explore and figure out our take on her, because I think she is a cipher to many fans. Like, they know the costume and maybe they know like a little bit of the history, but we wanted to give her more of a definitive persona.
That's awesome. I feel like it's almost reductive to say that, like, because these characters came first. So for me, it's weird. I'm like putting the cart before the horse, because I'm like, oh, I feel like there'll be a Batman Catwoman vibe to the book. But it's like, no, Batman, came after, Miss Fury came first. So, but I feel like,
I think that's okay. I mean, that's your point of
yeah,
reference. It's not. Though I will say, we're not going to do what people are probably expecting when you see those two characters in and think, well, of course they're going to lean into this and that. I think
yeah,
it's going to maybe pivot that way for a second and then pull back. I think both characters are different enough that they won't fall into that trap.
yeah. I've never read anything with Miss Fury. I didn't even know anything about the character, but I was researching it and she seemed
Mhm.
interesting.
Yeah,
She seems like a lot of fun, and some of the art looks awesome. I think I have a couple pictures saved from your run, so I'll pull them up really fast in case
cool.
anyone's watching. No, wrong button. Share screen and window. So this is what I use for the thumbnail picture right here. This just looks gorgeous.
Yeah, that's a Jay Lee variant cover. Yep.
And then, oh, this one came out too small. Oh,
That's
that's
okay.
pixelated.
That's a great Francesco, kind of a cropped Francesco variant as well. The covers have been amazing. The interior artist, is a guy named Federico Soressa, who I discovered actually through Instagram. We just started chatting, and we're going back and forth on an idea. And then the Green Hornet gig came together, and I asked him, is this something you would want to do? And he's got this great, very hyper detailed, but also classic style. Like, it looks a lot like Greg Smallwood. I mean, I don't want, he's not like identical to him, but it definitely evokes that same kind of grainy noir vibe that I think really fits with the story we're telling.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Is there any like bit of like the plot or anything that we're allowed to say, or pitch for the elevator pitch for the book that we're allowed to say?
Sure. Yeah. So Green Hornet, Miss Fury starts off fairly early in both of their careers, and we find that there's someone killing vigilantes in the city, and it's become a series of murders that's baffling the police and the government and Miss Fury and Green Hornet. What brings them together is that they both get clued in that their former mentor, a vigilante known as the Silver Shrike, has gone missing, and so through flashbacks and a little bit of the kind of unspooling mystery in the present, we see what their relationship is, and that relationship brings them both together as they try to figure out who's killing these other vigilantes and why. And that's kind of the springboard for the first issue. And obviously, the big thing for us, for Henry and I and Federico, is we want to show these are two pulp heroes that are not the same. I think a
Yeah,
lot of times people just say, well, it's a pulp vigilante, so this is what they do. If Green Hornet is kind of in the Batman ballpark, I would say Miss Fury is a little bit more, um, I guess, strategic, in that she's looking more at the big picture. She doesn't want to waste her time punching thugs. She wants to take out the kingpin, so not
interesting.
the kingpin, but she wants to take out the
Yeah,
head of the gang. She's much more about like systemic change, as opposed to just punching and throwing whatever criminal you see into jail. Um, So we wanted to show the contrast of those two philosophies, and also just give Federico a chance to draw these characters doing their thing, and remind people why they're cool and exciting, and hopefully we'll get to do more.
That's awesome, man. I was really impressed with Dick Tracy though. I totally binged the first 5 issues.
Oh,
Like
thanks.
it was fun. And I've literally have no experience with the character. Like I think I knew the name, I knew of the character, knew the name, but it was fun. So you write a good mystery, man. Like
Thank you.
I always like that always like trips me out. Like is like crafting the mystery, does that come first or does crafting the story come first? Like how do you know how much to dole out to make it, so the reader can follow along without giving everything away? I feel like that's such a tight line to walk.
It is hard. I think, yeah. I mean, the mystery and the story are kind of one and the same in that you don't. I never want, as a reader, I hate feeling shortchanged by a mystery. I hate getting to the end and it's like, oh, it was the bank attendant that you saw for 2 panels in issue 1 and never was mentioned again. Like, it has to feel like the reader has earned it, and that the reader could have gone back and looked over the clues and figured out who it was. For the first arc of Dick Tracy, it was less of a mystery and more of like, he's caught up in a gang war, and like, this is a defining moment for Dick Tracy. This is very much where he became the Dick Tracy we know and love. So in some, I joke with Mike that it's Dick Tracy year 1.5. So we're getting a little bit of, we're not getting the origin per se, because I don't think Dick Tracy really has that kind of Batman, bat crashing through the window type origin.
Yeah.
He's a cop, he's a detective, but this is the moment that defined him as a hero. Um, and so we wanted to play with all the toys, but unlike the movie, you watch the Dick Tracy movie and all the villains are there out of the gate. Everyone gets like 2 lines, and you're just kind of overwhelmed in a cool way. We wanted to give it a bit of a slower burn. Like, we introduced Big Boy, there's Mumbles, there's Flat Top, and Prune Face. We see a lot of the big pieces, but um, we definitely are saving a few for the next arc, which will be fun.
That's awesome. So my friend Bunk has a question. Has Dynamite announced how many issues the series is going on for? I'd love to see the series get a chance to breathe with more issues than a 6-issue miniseries.
Yeah, I would love that too. I think the market is very challenging at this time. It's not a criticism of anyone or Dynamite. It's I think we're at 5 issues for this first arc, and if you guys support it and it does well, then we, Henry and I and Federico, would happily do more.
That's awesome, man. Bunk is a massive fan of the question though, so he was pumped about this. He was pumped about this
Oh,
interview.
good. Yeah, yeah. I'm happy. I love the question. I'm really like pinching myself that I get to write her.
That's awesome. I'm excited for that. I actually read the 2 question omnibuses because the second one came out this year, so I read them both this year for the first time, and it was like such a crazy binge.
It's so good.
Um,
It's really like, it's just next level comics like that. The Question by Denny O'Neil, Animal Man by Grant Morrison. Those are really like my guiding lights in terms of like DC stuff.
Animal Man is awesome.
Oh yeah.
That one is such a trip. Also even the New 52 Animal Man, which was nowhere as still as good, but I still feel like the New 52 Animal Man was good.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
hope they
I
do
think that
more
was
with that character.
one of the best New 52 books, and I think Jeff Lemire did a fantastic job of weaving in the lore from Grant and Jamie Delano's run and the Rick Veitch run and everything, and making it into this big cohesive thing with the red and the green. And I love Animal Man as a dad, as a
Yeah.
family man. I think there's a lot of heart in that book. I think it was, for my money, one of the best, if not the best, New 52 books, and also still feels underrated in that not enough people talk about it.
Yeah. He also, okay, clarification, also a big Renee fan. I was pulling Gotham Central in singles and have an original page of the series with Renee and Crispus Allen. I also read Gotham's because I'm a collected editions reader, so I read things
Uh-huh.
way too late. So I read Gotham Central for the first time this year too, and I loved it all, but I felt like the ending was so abrupt. But other than that, it made me fall in love with the characters, and I think it's one of the best like omnibus if you're a new reader and you want something that's not like super canon based and like you
Yeah.
can just dive into. That book is
It's one
awesome.
of the best series, one of the best like big 2 comic series in the last like 30 years or 40 years. I think Brubaker and Rucka are just great writers, period. Crime writers, novelists, TV writers. I think Greg obviously has a particular affinity for Renee, and really gets the character. And if there's anyone I'm taking my cues from when it comes to Renee, it's Greg. And Greg's work with Cully and Greg's work in Gotham Central and 52, of course, when she becomes the Question. But that's really what I'm pulling from. There've been a lot of great takes on her, but if I have to think of one creator that my run is very indebted to, which isn't to say is as good as, but just like that is
Your
honoring,
guiding
it's
light,
probably
yeah.
Greg's run. Yeah.
That's awesome. Was there any elevator pitch announced for your Question series yet, or when is that coming out? Do we know?
Starts in November. Yeah.
Okay.
Same month as Green Hornet, so it's going to be a busy month. But yeah, the elevator pitch is in the wake of her departure from Gotham. Renee Montoya has to take a new gig, and she's basically the sheriff of the Justice League Watchtower, and so she's been tasked by the Trinity, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman to keep the Watchtower safe. And the Watchtower, as we'll learn as we read more in Justice League and beyond, is a really important touchstone for the DC universe. And so she's gone from being commissioner of Gotham City, which we see how that falls apart partially in Batman Brave and the Bold. I did a 3-part Renee story there that kind of inadvertently leads into the ongoing.
I need to read more of that. I read the winning card collected edition that came out. I think it was the Tom King, Mitch Gerard story from that book.
Oh
But
yeah.
I haven't read the other ones, but that one was awesome. But why do I want like an issue that's like Die Hard in the Watchtower with like Renee crawling through vents? I feel like that'd be hilarious.
Oh, like going through the Jeffries tube. Like, yeah, I mean, it's what I love about the book, and I'm biased because I'm writing it, is that it's a very dark mystery, like noir. It's very intense in that way, but you also have all these colorful characters popping in, and I get to kind of spin the wheel of my favorite characters and see who can show up and who can be of help to her. So it feels it feels very much in the universe, and so it's a love letter to the DC universe, but also as a murder mystery.
That's awesome, man. You have me pumped. Was there any obscure character that you wanted to have in that for some reason they said no, and you were like, darn, I wish I could have had Shining Knight or something like that?
Yeah, there's always like, I mean, I've put in a few wish lists and scripts, like, in the background. I'm like, oh, we can show these characters, and there's always going to be a give or take, like, oh, this character is over in this book, or this character is dead, or no writer, unless you're Mark Waid, is fully immersed in the DC lore in that exactly the status of every character. So I don't want to name names, but yeah, there's
Yeah,
always
you don't have
a
to.
few that you mention, and they're like, "Oh no, this character we're taking it, or it's taken somewhere else." But the ones I have gotten to use and have gotten to show more than make up for it.
That's awesome. Bunk saying, I feel like Alex's take on Renee is similar to how Greg followed Denny's take on Vic with both Batman Huntress Cry for Blood and 52. I love when a writer comes in with a specific touch point.
Yeah, I see. I think that's very accurate. I think Greg Rucka, and Denny O'Neil had a very direct relationship. Denny was Greg's editor for a long time. They were friends. So I think that baton passing was very intentional, and you can just see the synergy, like the way Renee and Vic's relationship evolved in 52, and then Renee taking over. My hope for this is that people will be excited to see Renee in a new setting and kind of see her pulled out of Gotham for a minute, but not lose any of the things that makes her Renee or makes the question the question.
Yeah, because I feel like Gotham is so important to her as a character, so it'll be interesting to see her in a new setting.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that Green Hornet was one of your bucket list characters. Are there some other bucket list characters that you still have?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I've done a lot of Spider-Man stuff, which has been fun. I did get to write Peter Parker Spider-Man, who was my character as a kid. I did a 10-page story for Marvel Zombies Black, White, and Blood. There's a Spider-Man story by me and Javi Fernandez, so that was a bucket list moment. I'm a big X-Men guy. I love the X-Men. Always, I did a short Polaris story with Danny Moonstar in it. I've written a Sunspot story, but I'm always kind of thinking about the X-Men in some way. I'm not pitching myself. I'm just saying like what my bucket list characters are. Yeah, I think that's it. I've gotten to write Star Wars. I've gotten to write, I love Batman too. I'd love to write some Batman. He does appear in the question, so that was a thrill to write some dialogue for Batman, which was neat, and Superman and Wonder Woman. So that's, there's been little like snippets of writing these characters, but would always be fun to do more.
That's awesome, man. Was there any like specific highlights to working on Green Hornet and Miss Fury, or something like a cool moment that you want to share?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think collaborating with Henry, my co-writer, has been the thrill. Like, Henry and I have known each other a long time. I think we both We came up kind of around the same time. I was working in DC when he was writing for different comic trade websites like The Beat. And I think Henry's a really talented writer. So when this opportunity came up, I wanted to jam with him. I that's what I like about comics, collaborating with people, especially collaborating with other writers and artists, just seeing how they approach projects, and you learn from other people. But in terms of the story, really just seeing Federico blossom, like I think this is his first big assignment. Not to minimize anything he's done before, but it's his first kind of mainstream comics work. So um, just seeing him get better from issue to issue. I'm seeing his finished pages for #2 come in now in my inbox, and it's always a treat. And I think people are going to be surprised. We've thrown in a bunch of fun Easter eggs. So like if you're a hardcore Green Hornet person or Miss Fury person, you'll get to see that. But if you're a newcomer, it's similar to Dick Tracy in that you don't have to be an expert in the lore to understand what's going on, but hopefully you'll enjoy the ride.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Like I said, I don't have much Green Hornet experience. I think sadly my only experience with it is the Seth Rogen movie that I saw for my birthday one year in theaters that I thought was, kind of mediocre, but
I saw it at the
um,
theater too. I don't remember having a bad experience. I thought it was fine. I mean, I think the cool thing about these characters that live on for so much time is the ones that really survive are the ones that are flexible, that can be tweaked
yeah,
and written in different ways. You can write Green Hornet as a very hard boiled, edgy mystery, which is kind of what we're doing. Or you can add some humor to it. I mean, you can see Lego Batman and you can see the Batman. So it's like, if your character is malleable, they will stand the test of different takes.
I know. I think that's one of the hardest parts is that like when someone's like, no, the character has to be this specific way and anything else is wrong. I'm like, dude, these characters have been around for 80 plus years, dude, if not longer. Like
Yeah,
they
they
can
don't
they
have to
ebb
be
and
anything.
flow.
Yeah.
And Lego Batman is so great in its own way, and the Batman is so great in its own way.
I loved Lego
Um,
Batman. I thought it was funny, and I thought I loved it even more because it was something I was able to share with my kids, and that made them love the character more. Um, I think not every story with a character is for everyone. So if it's not for you, there are many other stories you can read, and if there aren't any for you, then maybe you'll read another book. It's okay.
yeah. Um, that's exciting, man. Well, I'm gonna be picking it up, and it'll be my first Green Hornet comic,
Oh,
so
thanks.
I'm excited for that, man. Dynamite's been coming out with so many cool books lately.
Hmm.
I'm really blessed with them partnering up with us, giving us some interviews and stuff. It's been a lot of fun. And it's been fun reading single issues again because so long I've been I mean, you look here, I've been a huge collected editions fan
Oh,
for a
nice.
while.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
like now that I'm trying to support the people who give me time to be interviewed by buying their books, so it's fun to read single issues again. But I'm like, I hate waiting. I get so impatient, especially with a mystery story like yours. I feel like
Mhm.
that's going to be even harder to read, month to month.
Yeah, we're definitely going to torture you that at the end of each issue, you're going to really want the next issue immediately, and it'll still hopefully read pretty well in trade. But yeah, I mean, you have to work in the medium you're given, and so monthlies are fun because you have that cliffhanger moment. It is serialized fiction, so you want to keep people jazzed, so they come out next month.
So who were some of your biggest influences in comic books when you were starting out?
I was in a really interesting position because I was working in public. Everyone's like, "Oh, what's your breaking in story, and how can I evoke that?" I think I went about it a very different way. I worked in comics. I had a publicity background and marketing background, or well, I was a reporter, and so I went into publicity working at DC. But the fun thing about that is that I got to see. I had a very interesting perspective to see how writers did what they did. I got to see scripts. I got to see them, excuse me, do interviews and stuff. So people like Brad Meltzer, Gail Simone, Greg Rucka, Jeff Johns, people that I worked with, and I was their publicist, but I got to see like how they did the work, and what went into their stories. Like I would have conversations with them about their stories sometimes, and get some insight into it. And so it was really like a crash course in how to operate as a professional in comics, which was really inspiring. So it was almost like I was in training for those 4 or 5 years that I did it before I started writing on my own. I knew I always wanted to write. I knew that at some point I would have that fork in the road where it was like, okay, either write or either do this. And thankfully, I didn't have to make that decision for a long time. But in terms of like people that I read and I'm inspired by, Grant Morrison, their work is hugely inspirational, whether it's Animal Man, New X-Men, Doom Patrol, you name it, Batman Gothic, Arkham Asylum. They just have a way of injecting the story into the greater consciousness. You just feel like you've I don't want to liken it to a drug trip because I think that's the easy metaphor. I think
Arc of
it's
Asylum's kind of like a drug trip, though. If you're
no,
saying
but
Arc
I
of
think
Asylum specifically,
I think that also weakens the heart
yeah,
of some of their stories. Like you read Animal Man, it's a story about family and it's a story about belonging and about wondering where you fit in the world, and that's a very universal take. Greg Rucka is a huge influence. I think he writes female characters so well. That's a huge inspiration for me to try and make sure that you're versatile in how you're writing different characters. I think he crafts a great mystery. I think he gets to really the core. He writes from character first, and then the story kind of comes to the character, which is really how I operate as well. I love Ed Brubaker, Kelly Sue DeConnick. Trying to think, Matt Fraction. I was a little bit of a latecomer to Jonathan Hickman. I really tapped into his work with the X-Men stuff that I loved. I loved the Krakoa stuff, but I'm now going back and rereading his Fantastic Four and Avengers and all the lead up kind of to Secret Wars because I think
yeah.
I'm reading the Dawn of X stuff again, all the Krakoa stuff again, just for fun, in all my free
Right,
time.
that'll be a that'll be a long read.
Yeah, I mean it's 5 years of publishing, but it's a really special I think era for the X-Men. Trying to think who else. I love Jaime Hernandez, who does Love and Rockets. He does one half of Love and Rockets with Gilbert, his brother. I love how he blends the very fun, almost Archie style artwork with really human and slice of life stories that feel really powerful.
That's awesome, man. Out of all those names, the only one that's a sore spot for me is Greg Rucka because I accidentally read volume 2 of Lazarus thinking it was
Oh,
volume 1. And I
well,
did a
that's
whole
on you.
video. Yeah, I did a whole video on my channel, and people are like, "What are you talking about?" And I realized I had read Lazarus completely out of order. And I
Oh,
was like, I still enjoyed it. I thought I was just thrown into this world, and then but
yeah.
that was a fun mistake.
I
And
mean, that's the good thing about Greg's work is that, like I said, he doesn't talk down to you. Like you have to pay attention. You have to really focus. Like it's not homework. The hope is that
yeah,
it's entertaining, but it's also like watching an episode of The Wire versus like the real world. Which is no offense. I love reality TV as much as the next person. Maybe the real world's a bad example, but like like whatever, like a reality show where you can kind of laugh, but you can also be checking your phone and cleaning the apartment. Whereas with something like The Wire or Greg's work, you have to pay attention and you have to
yeah.
not take notes, but like be engaged. And I think that's more valuable
The
when you're
work
looking for that.
Yeah, that world building was so good that I thought I was just parachuted into this world, and I was like, "Okay, let me quickly learn who these characters are." And then
Well,
I realized,
you were,
yeah, I was,
except you
right?
parachuted yourself in there.
And yeah, so I read Lazarus out of order, and people like to tease me about that on my channel. But that's my worst mistake. Oh well.
I mean,
Um,
that's comics, so.
right? Everyone's Lazarus is someone's first.
Mhm.
So that's awesome, man. Were there any like Green Hornet characters because he was a Buckless character that you were like, if I ever write a Green Hornet character, I want to include this side character or something?
There
Um,
were a few villains. I don't want to spoil stuff because I think a lot of the stuff that's going to be coming up is from the lore.
okay,
We definitely use the supporting cast. Obviously, Kato is a big part of it. Being in, and I think we have a. I don't want to say too much, but we have a twist on their dynamic that I don't think has been seen before. That I think will be interesting for readers and longtime fans and new readers who want to see a twist on the like hero sidekick dynamic. But also we kind of go deep on some of the villains too. So I don't want to get into names yet, but we did our homework.
that's awesome, man. So a fun kind of off-topic question I like to ask is, what's a comic book that you think should be on more people's shelves? Like, what's one that maybe if I don't have, I should add? Like, what do you think is an underrated gem?
What do I think is an underrated gem? Hmm. I'm gonna cheat and I'm gonna look at I keep a list
Do
of
it.
all the stuff I'm reading. So I know this is a live show. So
Hey, it's okay.
uh
This is how people prove it's a live show.
you know what? One book that has come out that is not really a hidden gem by any means because the creators are very notable is The Power Fantasy by Kieran Gillen and Casper Wingard. It's just a great. Sometimes you feel jaded about superhero stuff, and you're like, everything's been done. They've never, there's no new ideas in terms of superheroes or superhero world building. But when I read that first issue, I felt very impressed, a little jealous, and just I was immediately hooked. It just felt like, okay, this is the kind of book that I could buckle into and read for like a really long time. Um, what else have I been reading? Sorry.
No, this is perfect, man. Honestly, this is for me. I want more books to read, so I'm writing
Yeah,
a
I
list of
love
what you recommend.
The new Zatanna miniseries by Mariko Tamaki and Javier Rodriguez. I think is really good. His art is fantastic, and Mariko is just consistently a great writer. Um,
Ooh, bunk agreeing with you about power fantasy.
yeah, Power Fantasy. It's just so good. It's only 2 issues in, and you're like, can we please have the next 40? Because, oh, and I've really liked Tim Seeley's Local Man. I know Tim Seeley and a bunch of people. So Tim Seeley and Tony Fleece, and I love, Tim is such a fan of that era and those different superheroes and the image revolution. It just feels like it's in conversation with some of my work, and it's cool to see Tim and that team cut loose.
So one
Yeah.
question that I like to ask also is my favorite format of books. Like if I could have my favorite book in any format are absolute editions from DC. If you could choose one book that you've written to get the absolute edition or to get some giant oversized treatment, which one would you love to see?
Huh. Yeah, I mean, I love the absolute format. It's so hard to pick favorites. I would have to say the Lynx, Legendary Lynx, which is also coming out in November. It's coming out from Mad Cave, and it needs a little explanation. I wrote a novel called Secret Identity that came out in 2022. It's a murder mystery in the 70s in the comic book industry. You follow this creator, this woman, Carmen Valdez, who creates a character anonymously, and then her collaborator is murdered. So she has to investigate the murder to kind of reclaim the character. But interspersed in the novel are pages of the comic book that she creates, the Legendary
Hmm.
Links. Um, the sequel, Alter Ego, is coming out this December, and it's set in the modern day, and it's basically about a new comic book artist who discovers this sordid history and has to kind of reinvestigate the mystery. And there's also comic book pages in that novel about that artist creates. So it's a little bit of a meta narrative,
Yeah.
but there's a comic book, The Legendary Links, that we're putting out in November that expands on the comic pages from the first novel into a full 4-issue story. And
Okay. So it's the
so,
comic within the comic.
right. And the idea is we've discovered this comic, we've gotten the rights to reprint them now for the first time in 40 years or 50 years is the Legendary Links comics. And it's drawn by Sandy Jarrell, who I think is so talented, super amazing, and one of my favorite collaborators. And so underrated. So what he did with the 70s comic stuff is he very much evoked comics of that era. So the hope is that you read them and you're like, wow, did this come out? Sometimes I get emails from people saying, hey, I've been to the comic shop and I can't find any issue or listing for Legendary Links. Like, did this really happen? And I have to very gently say it didn't happen. It's fiction, but now you're kind of making it. We're making it happen.
Yeah.
So now the book will exist, and I would love to see it in a huge kind of either artist edition or absolute format. I think that would be cool.
I kind of got that same vibe. What was the one criminal issue where he was in jail and he was reading comic books in jail and like they wrote the awesome comic book that he was reading?
Oh, I
w-
forgot. Yeah, but Brubaker and Phillips, who I love Criminal. They did an arc set kind of in comics, like where I'm blanking on the title. It's not Cruel Summer, but it's really good. So I remember reading that, but also trying to kind of stay away from it. You don't want to
yeah,
be stepping on somebody else's headspace.
that's awesome. Does Legendary Links, is it going to be like if you've never read Secret Identity, you can still love Legendary Links, or is it
Yeah,
definitely
all the pieces exist and work on their own. Like you could read Alter Ego, the sequel, standalone sequel is what we're calling it. You can read it on its own. And what I found is some people have read it on its own and they're like, oh, there's another book that I can read. Yes, Bad Weekend. Sorry. And that's Bad Weekend's excellent. But yes, each of the pieces, Secret Identity, Links, and Alter Ego can all be read individually. But I'm not going to lie, you will get more out of it if you read them all together.
yeah? What do you think's the best order to read them in once they're all out?
Oh, I would read it Secret Identity, Links, and Alter Ego.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, because Alter
And
Ego
then
has new art pages that are not in Links, that are only from the Alter Ego story.
is there going to be a comic within a comic and Alter Ego also, or
Yeah, there's comic pages. Like Annie Bustamante is the protagonist in Alter Ego, and she's basically creating a Lynx fan comic as she's left comics and she's become a film director, but because of stuff in Hollywood, she's between gigs, and so in the meantime, she's drawing her fan Lynx comic. And I don't want to spoil too much, but those are the pages you start to see.
That's awesome, man. That's such a unique idea. I've literally never thought about that, because sometimes things are so expanded when there's like newspaper articles in the background or a comic book or a TV
Yeah.
show inside the comic. But now to actually write that comic is awesome.
Yeah,
No,
I
I
mean,
don't
it's
think it
funny
was
when we
Savage
were
Sword or Criminal.
yeah, when we were doing Secret Identity and Sandy was drawing the pages, we kept saying like we have to just do this as a full comic at some point. But that made for a really weird but fun and unique writing experience because when we got to the Lynx story, we were like, okay, pages 4, 5, and 6 are done, but we need
Oh, so the ones we see in Secret Identity are actually in the.
they're in the Lynx comic. You're
That's
now
awesome.
seeing all the other ones around it and they're all colored and quote unquote remastered. But it was like almost it was this weird algorithm of like, well, if this is the last page of issue 2 and I know pages 6, 7, and 8 from issue 1, like how do I fill the rest and have it all make sense?
That had to be a fun outline. You're like almost doing a Mad Lib kind of like,
Yeah,
how
yeah,
does
it was
this end
fun.
up here to end up there?
I've never had I have to thank our editor Allison O'Toole, the most patient and understanding person, because it was such a bonkers journey to get it all done and get it to make sense and be cohesive, and I think it worked. So I'm happy with the end result.
That's awesome. Well, I know you said about 45 minutes, so
Yeah.
this is your moment now to plug whatever you want to plug. What would you like to share with my audience?
So much stuff is happening. Today, Spider-Man Stories from the Spider-Verse from Disney Books comes out. It's a short story collection. If you like my novel, Aranya Spider-Man 2099 Dark Tomorrow, I don't want to say this is a sequel, but there's connective tissue there, and it's a short story collection featuring A-level writers taking on, each of them writing a story about their favorite spider hero. I write the opening and closing chapters and basically came up with like the overarching motif, like how these stories come together, which was a blast to work with these writers and come up with a conceit that they could all fit into their stories in different ways. That's out today, which is exciting. And tomorrow is the launch of Star Wars Battle of Jakku Insurgency Rising by me, Leonard Kirk, Stefano Raphael, Rachel Rosenberg, Alex Sinclair, and so many other people. Like it's basically the Battle of Jakku is 3 4-issue miniseries that explain what happened after Return of the Jedi leading up to the Battle of Jakku, which if you saw The Force Awakens, was the final battle of the Galactic Civil War. So that's been fun to write this big epic Star Wars story, basically like a lost movie almost in terms of scope and characters that I got to use. Alter Ego comes out in December. That's the standalone sequel to Secret Identity, which won the LA Times Book Prize. Later this month, Dark Space is a sci-fi novel I co-wrote with my friend Rob Hart. If you like the big picture concept we've used is it's Star Trek meets John le Carré spy novels. So if you like espionage, you like Star Trek, you like space stuff, this is for you. Legendary Links comes out in November. The Question All Along the Watchtower #1 comes out in November. Green Hornet Miss Fury comes out in November. I'm sure I'm missing something. Oh yeah, I'm writing an Encanto novel. I wrote one.
Oh,
It's coming out. Yeah, it's a prequel to Encanto. It's a middle grade novel that basically tells you why Bruno left. And so I got to talk about Bruno, which was a lot of fun.
dude, my wife is going to be all about that. I love
Yeah.
whenever I find a book I can share with her. I mean, I know she's a little older than a middle grader, but Encanto's like she's probably watched it over 200 times since it
Oh
came
yeah,
out.
you should
So
totally get it for her. It's one of the things where my son mentioned it to a classmate and his classmate didn't believe him, and so he brought a galley to school. Yeah, it was funny.
that's awesome. They're like, my dad's writing Green Hornet. They're like, who's Green Hornet? Okay. My dad's writing Renee Matoya on The Question. No,
Yeah.
who's that? My dad's writing Encanto. Oh my god, your
Yeah,
dad's the
yeah, yeah.
coolest
That's the
person
one
in
that
the
the kids
world.
get. I mean, and the Spider-Man stuff, like he really recognizes the Spider-Man stuff. So
Yeah, and I guess we'll end it with Alex sounds really busy. I feel like I need to lie down just listening to all the stuff he's making.
yeah, tell me about it. I've got to dive back into work once we're done chatting.
You were great at that though, man. Like you could tell you were in publicity before or marketing before because you named everything perfectly, I feel like. So that was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to waste somebody's time. Like, I definitely want to make these count, and it's fun to chat and promote stuff. And this was really just fun to talk about influences and different ideas and kind of see the themes of your work because you're so busy, you being me, just sitting there kind of cranking on stuff that you sometimes miss the themes.
Well, awesome. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. Keep reading and stay brave in the stream.